hence why this segment is called Still Figuring It Out.
Yeah.
Because we are literally still figuring it out. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Still Figuring It Out on the Love Laid Bare platform. I am Rachel. We are also available to be listened to on all other streaming platforms, Google Play, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Okay, so today's episode is about social media, young people and parenting. Now, I must warn listeners that this potentially can be triggering. It can cause a lot of issues in regards to beliefs and understanding of what parenting is. Some people may feel very uncomfortable in regards to some of the topics I may raise. And there are some issues of a thing called cognitive dissonance, which I will speak about a little bit later. But cognitive dissonance is something that we believe in and hold true to our heart and what we believe is true, when actually there is evidence to prove otherwise, but we hold true to those beliefs. So we will be talking about those as well. So in a previous podcast, a live podcast with my colleague Kieran, who is from At Your Big Age, we were talking about at what age should young people have social media. Now, I was of the mindset that from hindsight, that maybe young people shouldn't have social media or technology until they are of a mature enough age to understand the responsibilities, to know who they are, as well as to have a formulated self-esteem and self-worth capacity. That means that when they see things, when they hear things, that they're not overly influenced enough to be distracted, to change their demeanor, and to question themselves regarding it. Now, in the previous podcast, I actually spoke about having a regret of giving my young sons at the time, who were young at the time, it wasn't even social media I gave them smartphones at the age of 13, thinking 13, you're a teenager, you're moving into an age whereby you're gaining more responsibility, more independence. Now, when I gave my first son his first smartphone, he was 13, and that was like 14 years ago. Now, in essence, that was when social media actually began. So we didn't really know the full capacity of how intrusive social media could be, how influential it could be, and I suppose how damaging it could be. Now, I'm not saying that those are the only things it does, but what I am saying is that there are aspects of social media that can be detrimental to our young people. Now, I asked a question on a previous podcast, at what age? But what I should have asked was, and what a question I should have posed was, what age do you think the social media platforms that most young people have, such as TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, what age do you think is the age that they are allowed to be able to have those social media? And the actual organizations that own those platforms, they have set an age limit of 13. Now, when I think of the 13-year-olds nowadays compared to my 13-year-olds back then, mine were quite young, quite impressionable, and when I look back, I realized that they were way too young for the content that I'm looking at now. Now, the content has developed significantly in the past 14 years, and literally, when I look at some of the content, even myself as an adult, I cringe, I'm uncomfortable with, and I'm like, how has this been allowed to stay up online? So when I think about that, and I think about 13-year-olds having access to this, and that's just the age limit that's been applied to those applications. That's not the age limit that parents apply, because there are some parents that are allowing their young people social media younger than that. Now, for me, I think that's a key element, and it's something we will discuss within the pod today. So, you know me, I love a stat. If you don't know, get to know. So when I started looking at the stats, and I looked at UK stats, because whenever you type in statistics online, more often than not, you get an American-based research that pops up. So I typed in UK, and it said 97% of children who were surveyed, so they surveyed over 6,258 parents and children, 97% of the children who were surveyed as young as 12 were on social media. 97%. So that's a large number. So then I started looking at, well, what were their feelings of social media? So these young people, so these 6,000 young people, what were they saying about social media? So over 70% of them said social media makes them feel anxious, stressed, depressed, with thoughts of suicide. That worried me. So then, I had to go and dig a little bit deeper. So then the average daily time spent on social media was about 3.5 hours. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's daily. Now, let's think about it. If young people from the age of 12 to 17, they're in education or they're at school. So at some point throughout the day, 8 hours of their day would have been spent in an educational establishment. So from 9 till 3, so 6 hours. Okay, we'll just do 9 till 3, okay? So that's 6 hours of their day. 8 hours of that day should be spent sleeping. So 8 plus 6 is 14. So you've got 10 hours within a space that literally, that 3.5 hours of those are spent. So that's a third of that time that's free, 10 hours that is spent on social media. That's a significant amount of time just as an average. So can you imagine if those who are above average, what they're spending time on? So then I started looking at the kind of statistics in regards to mental health decline. And when I started looking at it, I realized that there may be a correlation, and I don't know how many studies have been done, because I've been reading and I've been looking at how many studies have been done on the influence of social media on mental health. But what I did notice was since 2010, there has been a 330% increase in the decline of young people from the age of 17 to the age of 10, from 10 to 17, who has had a significant decline in their mental health, having to seek medical attention. For me, that's significant. That 330%, it's not even 10%, not 20, not even 100%, 330% increase in the number of young people from the age of 10 to 17 who are presenting to medical establishments, not just hospitals, but police and mental institutions and psychiatrics and children and mental health services, because of mental disorders such as anxiety, depression, stress, and suicide and self-harming. Now, I looked at what was the significance of 2010. And when you look, the significance is the introduction of social media. Now, I'm not saying all social media is bad. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is there a link to that 330% increase versus the mental health decline? So I started looking at, well, you've got 10-year-olds going onto social media. What does a 10-year-old need with social media? Now, when we asked the question on the pod that we did previously, there was a lot of, it's a reward, it's for entrepreneurial reasons, and potentially a distraction outside of school. Now, I remember when I was younger, and I know it's a little while ago, but I remember distractions were extracurricular activities. So that was tennis, swimming, roller skating, reading, that was karate, that was gymnastics. It was always external to the house, external to technology. And then I started realizing that from about 2008 onwards, technology began to evolve. And when I mean at such a rate that whereas we used to have to sit in the front room and go on the internet. Now it was portable. It was in your pocket. It was in your hands. And you could literally move about with technology at your fingertips 24 hours a day. Another alarm bell starts ringing, because you've now gone from a play kind of based childhood activities to technology based childhood activities. So I remember the first time we got a PlayStation, I believe it was. I think it was actually a Sega Mega Drive we had first. And literally, any free time we had, we'd run upstairs and we'd play this game. We'd play these games on the Sega Mega Drive. I wasn't really very good at it. Alex the Kid and Sonic, I think, were my favourites. But when you look at the content of some of the games that are coming out, you realise that they actually play an influence and have mood-changing effects on our young people. Now, when those gaming consoles came out, they weren't linked to the internet, because you used to have to plug in an Ethernet cable into the computer to be able to access the internet. And if somebody picked up the house phone, it would break the internet connection. So you wouldn't have constant Wi-Fi or constant broadband in your house, because it was attached to a wire. Fast forward 4 years, you've now got broadband and Wi-Fi in your house, which means that I don't necessarily have to sit in the front room anymore and use the computer. So now my parents are not overseeing what I'm looking at on the computer, because I'm no longer in the front room. I've now got the accessibility to the computer in my room, because I don't need it tied to where the phone line is. You then start to think, okay, so if I'm not in my parents' eyesight, what am I looking at, and how far will I push those boundaries? So then you start looking at, well, the reasonings behind why our young people are given technology. So I remember getting my son an iPad for his 16th birthday, and that was because he needed it for school. That's what I told myself. But actually, did he need it? Why did we not still have a desktop in the front room where he did his homework? Why did he need an iPad? When I then looked at, so then you then, because I'm a reflector, and it's only when you start looking at the impact of social media, you start looking at your own actions as a parent, and you have to acknowledge that some of the decisions that we make at the time, you reason them out and you make justifications for them. But in hindsight, actually, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. And I hold my hands up, and I've said that before. So I started asking parents, what's the reason why you've given your child technology? Why have you given them a smartphone? Why have you given them a console with access to the internet? Why have you given them an iPad? And homework was a key aspect in regards to why. Now, my previous reasoning, why have we taken the computer out of the living room and given it to our young people in their hands? Is that convenience? Is that because it doesn't look so great in the living room anymore? Well, we've now got a minimalist society where nobody has a desktop anymore. Well, why don't we? Because we have now become a society of convenience. Everything has become an age of convenience. Well, the phone is convenient because I can take it with me. I can look up anything anywhere. Is that an excuse? Are we at a point whereby we are making excuses for convenience because we are now in such a rush, and technology has primed us to be in such a necessity to have everything at our fingertips at every given point, 24 hours a day, that the overload has now become so normalized that we don't even check ourselves that actually our young people shouldn't have access to that level of responsibility by themselves. So I go back to the reasonings as why our young people have been given technology. So again, I said homework for educational purposes. Entrepreneurial reasons was one of the reasons. So if young people have been given, are creative and want to sell their products or want to sell their items or their content, they then use social media. So then they're given technology to do that. So they take photographs and they upload them, and they write comments underneath them. And you may not post your young person, but potentially based on the content that they're putting out, people can identify that they are young people. Some people said that they gave their young people social media and technology as a reward. Now that kind of made me question that a little bit more. And I meant, well, what do you mean by a reward? Well, the answer was, well, they're doing very well in school. They're excelling. They are A students. They're excelling in all of their grades. They do very well. They're manageable. They've been given accolades. They do extracurricular activities, and they're excelling in those as well. And the first thing that sprang to mind was, well, if they're doing so well in all of those things, why would you place a distraction tool in their hand? Because where are they finding time with these extracurricular activities within that 10-hour space? Where are you spending time with them if they're doing all of these extracurricular activities? Where is now the time being split between the technology that you've handed to them in their hand, your time with them, and the extracurricular activities? So you start questioning, and you find that there are some parents that, because of the cognitive dissonance that I spoke about earlier in this pod, you get parents trying to justify why they've given their young people, as young as 10, technology, social media, and there's a justification. It's, well, you know, everybody else has got a phone, and, you know, they may be teased. Okay. So then I started looking at, actually, is that just lazy parenting? And as I said earlier, I know that I'm going to upset some people. I know. But if I don't speak about these things, and we don't speak about these things as a society and a collective, we potentially do ourselves, our children, and everybody else's children a disservice. So when I say lazy parenting, I don't mean it as in that you don't care about your children. What it means is that by handing them a device, it means that they're out of your hair for a while and that you can get to do what you need to do. Now, also, is it lazy parenting that actually that young person has now got a space to be able to be outside of your remit and enter into a world that is not demonstrated into your home? Because when I talk about lazy parenting, I'm talking about, well, the justification was they're going to get teased. People are going to mock them. Everybody else is doing it. Now, that child is your child, not everybody else's child. Secondly, everybody else is doing it. Okay, but then does that make it right just because people are doing it? Thirdly, actually, well, they're going to get mocked. But have you given them the tools to override, to understand that that mocking is a lack that appears in other children? And if you feel your child to the point that their self-worth and self-esteem is not wrapped up in materialism, access to content that they shouldn't be accessing, and access to social media that has the capacity and potential to damage their self-esteem, their mental self-worth, their stress capacities, and their actual hormones within their physical body, are we doing enough parenting? So you then start looking at, okay, well, I'm monitoring the social media. Now, there are some incidences where you can monitor your young person within your constraints of your household. But there are young people who are given technology. There are young people who are given smartphones, given social media, and their parents don't. There's no parental controls on their technology. There is There is no consistent checking of what is being watched or what is being accessed. And there is actually no checking of the phone itself. So that trust is given to that child because the parent believes that they have done enough to not have to check. But actually, young people have a tendency to push boundaries because they're learning about themselves. So when they push that boundary and you're not checking it, how do you then pull it back? So you're a young person, you're checking their social media, you're checking what they're looking at, you're checking the content that they're seeing. You are doing your job. There's a parent who may not do theirs. Your child now goes to school, your young person goes to school and is now exposed to that young person who is not being checked, who is able to access any kind of content on social media. They now begin talking to your child, your young person, and relaying what they've seen. Be it right, be it wrong, but they're relaying their understanding, their visual, their comprehension of what they've seen and sharing that information. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't do that when we was younger, because we used to watch videos, and we used to have magazines, and people would share magazines and people would share videos and share CDs. However, more often than not, they weren't accessible 24/7. They had to be purchased. They had to be played in a particular place, and they had to be visually watched with the potential of someone coming to catch them watching anything that was inappropriate. When you're talking about social media, we're talking about a 24/7 access, and I mean 24 hours a day. You could wake up your young person, if you don't take away that phone from them at night time, could wake up in the middle of the night and be looking at anything. Now, I heard someone say, yeah, but I've got parental controls. The other day I was watching a cartoon, age appropriate apparently, and the level of innuendos in that cartoon was amazing to me. And I mean sexual innuendos and violent innuendos. Cartoons, just because they are animated, doesn't mean that they don't demonstrate bad behaviors and behaviors that can create stress, anxiety, depression, and thoughts of suicide. Not only are we talking just about cartoons, there are some young people's programs that have adult content in them, but because they are deemed an age rating, people believe that the age rate that has been set is appropriate for your young person. How do you know? Just because it said, it's a 12A. The 12 is for 12 years old, but what kind of 12-year-old? What has that 12-year-old been exposed to? Who set those parameters for that 12-year-old? And that A is for advisory. That means it needs to be advisable to an adult advisory. You then get 15. Who's 15? What 15-year-old? Because some of the 15-year-old films I've seen, there's a whole load of swearing in it. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. I don't commend and I don't condone that. But it's been labelled an age, and people take things that have been, I suppose, normalised in society and accepted as the right, and I quote unquote, the right way of doing things, and not applying them to your actual individual young person. You see, now the problem is if your young person has been given the tools from young to understand their self-worth, to understand their self-esteem, to understand how to deal with conflict resolution, how to deal with when feelings of embarrassment and ego arise, then when they go to school with a phone that's not a smartphone and somebody says, you don't even have a smartphone. Okay, yeah, no, I don't need one. What do I need it for? We then get to the question, what is it they need it for? Ask the question again. Their homework. Okay, so when the homework's done, do you take it away from them? It's a question I ask. Okay, but it's just so they, so they can keep in contact with their friends. Okay, but their friends are at school. They will see them Monday to Friday. Their friends can arrange, and the parents can arrange for them to meet at weekends. Because what I'm worried about is the adultification of our young people, that they are becoming more adult a lot more sooner than they should be. I remember when I see some of these 12 and 13 and 14-year-old girls with eyelash and nails and coloured hair and weave, I'm thinking to myself, hold on, I was still worrying about what colour bobbles I was wearing and whether I wanted to wear a puffball skirt and whether or not my mum would let me wear the little belly top that might show a little bit of belly. It wasn't going to happen. Claudette Rose was not going to let no form of belly top out a yard. Yeah? Not at the age of 14. You better make sure you got a string vest over that, a cut-up T-shirt over that. You ain't going out in no belly top, just belly top on its own. So when I'm seeing some of these young people coming out, I'm like, okay, who are you dressing up for? Who are you wearing eyelashes for? Who are you wearing weave for? Because wigs for me were an adult thing. I never wanted to wear a wig when I was younger. Wig. Listen, when I thought of wigs, I thought of the lean wig that my grannies used to wear. My granny doesn't wear a wig, but like you'd see some grannies and the wig lean, it twists, no. Now, some of these wigs, they're coming from China and Brazil and all sorts. So who are they wearing these weaves for? Who are they wearing these wigs for? Who are they wearing the eyelashes for? Who are they wearing the nails for? And I then begin to ask the young people the question. So, why do you wear a weave? Oh no, I saw this girl on social media, her hair looked laid, it looked lit. I saw this girl on a video, a music video. Now, let's not get it twisted. We had the box. We had Yo MTV Raps. We had all of those. And back in our day, it was perms. Now, I wasn't allowed to perm my hair until I was over 16. My mum wasn't having it. She was not having a bar of it. And I think I permed my hair once when I was 16, twice, and then it stopped. And then I re-permed it when I was about 19, 20, and then permed it up until I was about 26, and then stopped perming again. Like, I was queen of creamy crack. And it wasn't because the women in videos inveigled me to do that. It was about the number of styles I could have and the versatility and the level of colour I could have in it. It wasn't because I'd seen somebody else with it and thought, I want that, I need to fit in. But when I look at these young people, majority of them look like clones. They have all got the same weave, with the same hairstyle, with the same curls in it. The eyelashes, they get thicker and thicker till you start batting and they start blowing people away. The nails are getting longer and longer. And it's because of a need to belong. But had we instilled the self-esteem, the self-worth, and the understanding that to be an individual is your superpower, you will belong anywhere you stand because you are you. Social media isn't teaching this at the moment. Now, for some, and as I said, social media isn't all bad, because for some, it actually improves their mental well-being on the basis of the fact that they don't feel lonely because they've got an increased level of interaction. But who are they interacting with? Who is checking who they're interacting with? Why is their self-esteem being stroked? Because for some reason, when you're measuring that self-esteem improvement because of social media, is it because they're getting their ego stroked? And is it because it's a form of ego stroking that is based upon the looks of what is being shown on social media? Is the interaction because of, actually, I feel like I belong because my hair is right, my nails are right, my eyelashes are right? What is that interaction doing? And I'll give you an analogy. When our young people are interacting with certain types of people on social media and they're getting that ego boost and that dopamine boost. So that dopamine is that feel-good hormone that runs through your body. When you're getting that and who you're getting it from, okay, it shouldn't be a necessity to have to gain that for you to feel good. There are some young people that are so addicted to that dopamine level that they literally will fight their parents for their phone. They won't hand over their phone. They are addicted. And that's because they're addicted to the dopamine levels. And for when you look at most social media outlets, they don't have a dislike button. So that ego stroke, that feeling of belonging, that interaction that is feeding that dopamine addiction is like petrol, okay? I say petrol. Now you have a car, and I said I was going to give you an analogy. You have a car, okay? But your car's diesel. And you can drive the diesel, it drives beautifully, wonderfully smooth. But one day you realise, actually, I've run out of diesel and I don't know how to fill it back up myself. I'm going to go to the petrol station. I've got a choice of instant gratification through social media, which is my petrol, or self-work, self-esteem and self-worth, which is the diesel. Now, you know your car runs on diesel, but it's going to take longer to fill up your car with this diesel. I pick up the petrol, my car's going to go. My car's going to drive a little while. And it's quick. I need to go, I need to get there. So you fill up the car with the petrol. You fill it up with the social media. You fill it up with the ego boosts. You fill it up with the dopamine overload. You get halfway down the road and your car starts coughing. Car starts coughing. Car's not working too great. Fill it up with a little bit more petrol, it might go a little bit further. Quick, fill it up with the petrol again, it goes a little bit further. Car's getting sicker and sicker. Because if you don't put petrol in it, yeah, it's not going to go nowhere. So now you're addicted to the petrol in the car because it takes you fast, but it don't take you far. You start thinking about it. One day there's no petrol available, but you need to go somewhere. Now, the petrol, the diesel is now deflated. It's depleted because you haven't been using it. It's gone off. What are we doing? You're going to search for the dopamine, aren't you? You're searching for the instant gratification. You're searching for the like, for the dopamine overload, for that feel-good factor that the social media brings you. How many times have you posted a picture and took it down because there weren't that many likes? How many times have you complained? And I've seen so many people do it. Yeah, because, people looked at my video but didn't click like. How many times have you done it? Why did it matter? Why did you need that validation? Why did you need that petrol? Was your diesel not enough? Because it took longer to fill up. Because it didn't take you fast. Why was that diesel not enough? And these are the questions we need to start asking our young people, and we need to start asking us as adults, because there are adults. There are adults. Go on.
I'm so glad you mentioned adults, because it's very evident with adults today, yep, the rates of body dysmorphia, the rates of people doing very dangerous surgical enhancements to themselves. The level of social media addiction amongst adults themselves.
Rife.
So how do we expect children to manage social media and its effects if we as adults can't even do that?
Okay, so I'm going to ask the adults watching the podcast today a question. How many times have you gone on your phone to go in your internet banking? And I've said it before on a previous post. You've gone to go on your internet banking, but Instagram's caught your eye and you've opened it. 2 hours later, you still haven't sent the money you were supposed to send, or you still haven't paid the bill you were supposed to pay. That is an addiction.
Absolutely. And I think what the adults who are listening need to really understand is that these social media apps are marketing tools.
Yes.
They are designed for you to be on there for as long as possible in order for those companies to gain revenue from their marketing. Now, everyone should have noticed by now, if you go onto your Instagram feed, 95% of it isn't even people that you actually follow.
No, a whole load of sponsored, and who I don't even know this person. Why are they on my feed?
Right. So I'll just give you a classic example. I was looking for eyebrows, and I followed a particular page. As soon as I went back to my feed, all I've been flooded with
Is eyebrows.
is eyebrows.
Algorithms.
So, with that being said, if your young person, let's say, clicks on a post that they ordinarily wouldn't have even have clicked on, all of a sudden they're now being flooded with these images or videos over and over and over.
Exposed to.
And overexposed to. I think I definitely, as much as it is harsh to hear, it's very poignant in what you said in terms of the lazy parenting. And people aren't going to want to hear it, but it's actually the truth.
And the thing is, I'll be very honest, there are times that parents, we do need a break, but don't put them in front of technology to get that break, because what we are doing is exposing our young people to certain types of lifestyles that we would not uphold in our own households. We are exposing them to particular types of lifestyles, particular types of, I say, not just lifestyles, but attitudes. And we're exposing them. So, for example, what I was saying about these young girls, these young women not being happy with their own hair and having or feeling the need to wear weave, eyelashes and fingernails. How far will that stop? How far will that unhappiness of what your real self, natural self looks like take before you're looking at, well, I haven't got enough breast, I haven't got enough stomach, or I've got too much stomach, or I've not got enough bottom.
But we see where that goes with adults.
Exactly. Do you know how many women died last year alone from BBLs? And we're not just talking about, these are people who, some people have gone, had it done, recommended their friend goes, in the words of my mother, puss and dog don't have the same luck. Just because your friend got it, don't mean say you can get it and it's going to be the same outcome. Do you understand? What is it why you're getting that BBL? What is it that has driven that need for that BBL? Is it social media? And if it is, can you reflect honestly and say, actually, I don't need this? Because actually, when you hear some of the surveys from the men regarding BBLs,
they're not interested. They don't like it.
They don't like it. They like it to look at. It's nice to play with, but to become a wife from, to be taken seriously with, more often than not, men are like, I wouldn't wife one. I'd play with it, but I wouldn't wife it. And that survey was prominent. Because when I looked, I think there was over 200 men that they interviewed. And every one of them said, no, thank you. It's nice to look at, it's nice to play with. And again, when did BBLs become so prominent?
Social media.
Again. And it's not even just social media, it's the technology. It's that placing your young person in front of a television, placing them in front of social media, placing them in front of videos, music videos, that sell these types of lifestyles and attitudes and... I'm trying to think of the word. It's just that whole demeanor of this is what is successful. This is what, it's not even just success. This is what made it looks like.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, because I'm thinking back to like the 90s when we had Kate Moss.
Yes.
And, the in thing at the time was to be as skinny and as possible. What was her quote? Skinny feels better than eating, or something like that. So we had this wave in the 90s of a lot of young girls having eating disorders, anorexia, all of this type of thing. Now, I think, interesting enough, with the BBL conversation, I think, for the Black community especially, we have always honoured the curvier body.
Yes, most definitely.
And I think...
Most of us.
And I feel like it's a difficult one, because most of us as culturally would honour that type of body, right? Now, when that body type, because again, when you think back to the 90s, you know, whether it's reggae, R&B, hip hop culture, the bums and the asses weren't that much of a big deal.
No, because it was a normality in those days. And what happened was, I find, is if you had a big bottom, more often than not, you covered it.
Yes.
So you either wore, all day, every day, tents, all day, every day. Like, I wasn't even allowed to go out in just leggings. I had to wear shorts over it, or we had to wear jean skirts and tie a knot in it. And there was always something, you was not allowed to have your front and back out just like that. Mm-hmm. So to see these young girls now walking out with just leggings on, and half of them, they're see-through as well, because that's the trend. But where did the trend and idea come from?
Question for you.
Go ahead.
Do you think that because for so long the black female body was so disregarded, and we've now moved into a place where the body is now almost being celebrated, do you think that potentially has had a negative or an opposite effect, because now there are maybe women who don't necessarily have that body shape, now it is being celebrated, it's having a detrimental effect?
I think it goes back way before then, because you had Sarah Bartman. She was put into it. She was a black woman who had a very large posterior, and she was placed into a museum, and an external museum, and people literally used to come and pay to see her body. They stripped her naked. She was a slave, and she had a very wholesome. She had a very buxom, a buxom body. So she had a large posterior, she had a large rear, and she had quite big breasts, and they would literally gawp at her because of her shape. And literally within the slavery days, there were a lot of white women who didn't have those shapes. So what they did was they started wearing dresses with the actual wire undercoating to emulate Sarah. So our bodies have always, black women's bodies have always been a center of excellence in regards to that shape. But
at periods of time,
periods of time. So in the 90s, it was covered up. It was a lot of baggy trousers. It was a lot of, when you look at Aaliyah and you look at Lauryn Hill, baggy trousers. A lot of that. You start going into the like mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. The clothes began to get a lot more refined, a lot more slimmer. And then the shape began to accentuate. And I think you are right. I think the celebration and the music changed potentially, because it became quite raw and sexualized, then began to shine a greater light on bodies and the sexuality of those bodies. And it then potentially did have a detrimental effect, because the trend on social media was, this is the shape you're supposed to have. This is what you're supposed to look like. This is what made it looks like. This is what I have, and you should want it too. Again, as Dee said, it is a marketing tool. Now, as much as you don't think posting up that content is marketing, it's marketing for the doctor, because now you're having arguments on social media about, is it real, is it not? I've had people walk behind me, no, it's not real. It's not real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, tell me about it's not real. And I can hear them, literally. It's amazing to me. And I'm like, well, it's your business if you want to think it's real, if it's not. I've had people, she takes injections, right? Yeah. Listen, yam dumpling and plantain and sweet potato. Listen, my nemesis, that and bread. Woo, yeah. But again, it's not a boastful thing, but I'm now being compared to women who are risking their lives because of a trend and a fad or a requirement that's been outlined by social media. And again, I agree with you. It's become detrimental to women are willing to risk and jeopardize their lives because they think that men may potentially like it, or because those women who are successful and getting things look like that. Because when you look at potentially the Cardi B's, the Bernice Burgos, those women are shaped like that, and some of them are not natural.
100%, yeah.
So when you're looking at somebody like Cardi B who's shaped like that, by not natural means, and she's getting Birkin bags, and she's become successful, she's got money, you then start tying success to that. When actually, that's not what's caused her success. It's the push of her, it's the marketing of her, it's the people that have been able to give her that opportunity to get into those spaces. And if we keep perpetuating and watching those things, do we then not feed into that trend and demonstrate actually we're giving her those kudos, which then perpetuates that trend and perpetuates that need for our young people to look up to these types of people. It's dangerous. I think social media as well, in regards to misinformation, is very, very dangerous for our young people, because we say, oh, we've given them technology based upon education. What are we educating them on? When you're saying homework, when you click, sometimes as an adult, I click in search engines and I look at things and I have to look at, okay, who posted this? When did they post this? What research did they get? The research that I'm looking at, who paid for it? Because if the right person pays for the research, you might get particular outcomes. So social media has become a place and a hub whereby responsibility as a young person is a great responsibility. It's a very large responsibility. And as Dee said earlier, if adults can't even manage their addiction, can't even not look at social media, how do you expect a young person to not do it and be influenced by it, especially if their mind is still being formed and shaped? I could talk about this all day, every day, because it's not just the influence, it's about the impact on society, the impact on these young people and their mindsets. And as they become adults, how they interact with others in the world. What are they teaching their peers? What literally are they understanding of the world? What are they understanding of themselves from social media? And if they're finding that they're having to find themselves through social media, have they got the right influences in what they're watching? How do you know if they're locked up in their rooms? How do you know if they're no longer in the front room socializing with the family? If you're not doing things with the family, but your child's head is stuck in a social media app and they don't want to engage, what are you doing as a parent to engage them back into that family space? What are you doing to engage them back into that space whereby social media is not more important than having a conversation? That social media is not more than body language and emotions. I think when I look at social media and I look at the impact on our young people, when I look at our young men in regards to social media, there is such a spectrum of social media that there are some young men who are learning how to be men through social media, and the men that are on social media are not actually men. When I say that, I'm not being highly disrespectful, but there are some men on social media that lack principles, lack morals, and lack ethics, and they boast about these things. And because they have money and because they have material things, that is deemed as making it as a man, when actually none of you have ever been able to even articulate your emotions, your feelings, what being a man actually feels like to you, because you've got built up such a bravado on social media. You can never let that guard down now, so you're now constantly acting. How does that work? What does that feel like? You're living a daily life because social media, you've built this social media character, and you now can't let that guard down. Like, the impact of social media is so detrimental. And as I said, especially on our young people, if we as adults, we as parents, do not guide our young people in regards to the aspects of just self-esteem, self-worth, loving self, understanding how to deal with conflict, looking at ego and pride and embarrassment and how you deal with that. How do you deal with rejection? If you don't embed those things from a young age, before social media has the capacity, the ability to influence them, we're not doing our jobs. And what I will say as well is that because Dee's got a child, yes, it's Dee's child, but that child is going to interact with my child. That means Dee's child is my child. Your child is my child. All of our, as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise children, and it literally does. It literally does. Because if we don't take it in hand collectively as adults and become one with regards to our approach and our principles to social media, this isn't only going to get worse by the amount of stabbings we see on the news. This is going to be about babies having babies. This is going to be about young people losing their lives due to BBLs and the need to want to put certain types of products into their hair. This is going to be about our young people not understanding themselves and selling themselves on OnlyFans at very young ages because it will get me money, and it's better to cry in a Ferrari than in a Mini. Let me not even start with that woman, yeah? Because anyway, it's not better to cry anywhere. And that's what our aim is. We don't want our children crying. What we want is our children to be wholesome, to be whole, to understand self, to understand self-worth, to produce and to develop their creative sides that demonstrate their individuality. Now, yes, we all want to belong, but do it on the basis of your individuality and your capacity to be you, not because social media said this is who you should be. I'm going to wrap up this conversation, and I want to say thank you to everybody that's locked into Still Figuring It Out. And if you haven't subscribed to the Love Laid Bare platform, please do head over to YouTube, click that button. And we are also available on all streaming platforms, including Google Play, Apple Pod, and Spotify. Thank you very much. That's a wrap.
Love Laid Bare.